When I learned recently that a new Double Dragon game was being made, I'll be honest, as always I was excited for this, but at the same time I was a bit worried. Double Dragon may be the franchise that established the cooperative beat 'em up genre as we know it, but at the same time the series has always been like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. For every all-time great out there, such as Double Dragon 2 The Revenge or the amazing Double Dragon Advance, there are embarrassing turds, such as Double Dragon 5 or the dreadful Xbox 360 game. So holding these thoughts, with the next chapter being written in Binny and Jimmy's roller coaster of an adventure, I was keen yet apprehensive to see what 2023 would bring to the table. Past this point, not only have I now thoroughly played this latest entry, but I have even had the fortune of interviewing the creative director and producer of this gem. So sit back, relax and let me educate you on everything you could possibly want to know about this brotherly beat 'em up. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is Double Dragon Gaiden, Rise of the Dragons. Yeah. If you don't know already, let me tell you now. I freaking love Double Dragon, and have always found the history of the series thoroughly fascinating. For this reason, I am the only man on YouTube who has been crazy enough to upload singular deep dive videos covering every game from the franchise up until this point. In an equally crazy move, I even compiled the main parts of these into a ridiculously long 3 hour and 20-minute documentary. So I feel I have a decent grasp of what a good Double Dragon game is, and equally as importantly, what isn't. Back in May of this year, I received an email in my inbox and a couple of YouTube comments that literally gave me goosebumps. These communications were from a man who was in charge of making the next entry in the Double Dragon series, who was contacting me to tell me that not only was a new Double Dragon game on its way, but he had been using this very channel as a research tool to learn even more about the franchise and what fans liked and disliked about each game. I'm not going to lie, this absolutely blew my mind, because it meant I'd gone from nostalgically covering Double Dragon's past to in my own little way influencing the legendary series' future. There is nothing more satisfying as a so-called professional influencer that apparently influences things. So for this reason, I take full complete credit for Double Dragon going back in the right direction. Jokes aside, the man I have been speaking to, Raymond Teo, and those who worked with him deserve all the credit. Rise of the Dragons is an absolutely magnificent game, and I still can't quite believe how addictive it is and how awesome it has turned out. But before we delve into the brilliant gameplay this one has on offer, you're probably wondering how this latest offering came into existence in the first place. So let's go back to the beginning. Raymond Teo is a Singapore native, still living and operating from there to this day. Like the majority of you watching this channel, Raymond grew up gaming, with him personally starting on the NES before moving on to the Mega Drive, Super Nintendo and so forth. This meant he experienced the likes of the original Double Dragon, Streets of Rage, etc. all in their primes. By the time he had grown up, he alongside a friend would start a multimedia design studio, and one of the elements of their business was creating advertising games. These were usually just micro games made using Flash, but Raymond recalls it being one of the most entertaining elements of his job. Not long after starting this endeavour, the Singapore government announced that they were offering a small grant to those who wanted to make video games. So he took a leap of faith to leave the design studio and start making games full-time instead. This was around 2008, so it was unclear how much money he could actually make with indie games, so would try everything from Flash games to Xbox Live indie games and mobile ones, with him eventually settling down on Steam. After a decade plying his trade, in 2018 one of his games known as Streets of Red was released on consoles, a zombie-themed beat-em-up. When it comes to this critically well-received game, Raymond notes that he learned a lot from this project, and it was this game that helped him the most in developing a Double Dragon one. Streets of Red gave him and who he worked with an instant head start on making Double Dragon Gaiden what it is, not just in terms of the feedback they gathered, but also how to build the tech needed that allowed them to create so many characters that can be played so differently, something we would definitely talk more about soon. Streets of Red reduced the time they would have needed experimenting, and instead gave them more time to make things work and make things fun. But still, none of this answers the question how they went from working on this indie project to a legendary IP like Double Dragon. So what's the missing chapter in this story? Well, according to Raymond, back when Streets of Red was released on Steam in 2015 under the title of Devil's Dare, Arc System Works would be impressed with the game and reach out to him. Unfortunately, he'd already signed with a publisher at the time, so a collaboration did not happen. But in 2018, remembering their interest in his work, Raymond would decide to reach out back to them. Raymond recalled they had actually acquired the Double Dragon IP and just released Double Dragon 4 in 2017. He notes Double Dragon 4 was developed by the original Double Dragon developers, and you can tell it's a love letter to the classic NES version. Since they'd just tried that, he wondered if they would be interested in a version that pushes the IP in a much newer direction, so reached out to them and pitched his grand vision. Raymond adds they really liked his ideas and appreciated his knowledge of the beat-em-ups and the IP in general. But even then, it seemed way too big of an intellectual property to give it to a relatively unknown indie developer. Still, Raymond pushed, and after an entire year of discussion and persistence, he finally managed to convince them to let him make a Double Dragon game. As awesome as this opportunity was, as we have seen in the past, making a good Double Dragon game is no easy feat, with there certainly being barriers in the way that could hinder Raymond's chances to. Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons would be developed by Secret Base, who Raymond admits is really just him. He is the founder of the company and the creative vision holder, who tasked himself with handling design, art and the production of the new Double Dragon. To achieve this, he worked with his project partner, Shan Yu, who was in charge of all the programming and technical challenges, with the core team being just the two of them. Of course, to make a beat-em-up capable of competing with the best like Shredder's Revenge and Streets of Rage 4, a game of such scope cannot be done with just two people, so therefore they had the help of student interns and part-time designers. Two lads, Ray and Nicholas, who worked with them during the late alpha and early beta stages of the development, working on AI, character balancing, level integration and so on. To make development more of a tall task, the project was also done during the pandemic, so they had lots of help from freelance animators, composers, etc. from all over the world. Raymond notes that logistically it was crazy managing everyone from all parts of the world by himself, but it was also amazing to have everyone come together to create such a special game. Perhaps most impressive about all of this was that the project was actually self-funded, and Raymond ended up spending every penny he ever made in the past to get this done. What made this for more challenging was because every licensed game has a timeline. He had to get the game finished in time. The game was pretty much already done by the time they reached out to Modus to get funding for porting, QA support and help with marketing so they could get the word out. Overall, Raymond notes that it was an extremely tough challenge to get this game done, with them introducing something new at every turn. Double Dragon Gaiden, being self-funded, also had a much smaller budget than other modern beat-em-ups, so trying to finish everything before the deadline was rough. Worst of all, halfway through development, Shan Yu, the game's only programmer, fell seriously ill and was not able to work for months. The illness badly affected his ability to speak, and it was unclear if he could continue to work on the project. Raymond notes they had already spent so much money, they had no choice but to continue. Only the two of them knew about this, as they didn't want to worry anybody else, and it was a lot to bear. Miraculously, they managed to effectively communicate with each other and keep the project moving, and thankfully, Shan Yu got better as time went by. But Raymond adds it was 12 months of hell that he wouldn't wish on his worst enemy. So, as you can probably tell from all of this, nothing was stopping these boys from trying to produce simply one of the greatest Double Dragon games ever made. Grit, determination, blood, sweat and tears all went into this insane project. So let us begin to start talking about the results of a Double Dragon title that has apparently been secretly years in the making. Upon powering the game on, we instantly hear the classic Double Dragon theme tune, making long-term fans of the franchise feel pumped and at home right away from the get-go. Before selecting story mode on the main menu, the option is there to also learn how to play at the bottom, which it does a great job of informing us about some of the changes this game contains to previous entries in the series. This option educates us that when playing story mode we have the opportunity to earn and spend cash while playing the game. This cash can be gathered by defeating enemies and found within breakable objects, and when a game is over the remaining cash is converted into tokens which can be used to unlock new content in the game shop. That's right, unlike modern games that make you pay using real-world money to get unlockable DLC, like games of old, Double Dragon Gaiden is packed to the brim with content that you instead must unlock through skill and perseverance, instantly giving us a reason to keep coming back for more. Building on the in-game money-making mechanic, when starting a new game in Gaiden, we the player can tweak the difficulty prior to a playthrough using the new game modifier. Essentially, changing the difficulty will also affect the token exchange rate, so the more you challenge yourself, the higher the reward will be on offer. Why can't all modern games reward us like this for getting good at them? In terms of improving this lucrative cash flow further, knocking out opponents using special moves results in them spilling more cash. And if you could manage to knock out multiple opponents at once with one of these blows, the reward gets even higher, including them dropping items that allow us to regain health. These triple or quadruple KOs are known as crowd controls and are incredibly satisfying to pull off. Perhaps the most innovative feature, and one I cannot recall seeing in a beat 'em up before, is the game's tag team action. Players holla holla holla. If you can remember how the tag team feature works in Marvel vs Capcom games, we have something similar in this one. Each character in play has a special meter, which can either be used to perform special moves or instead used to tag in your second character. Basically, on the player select screen at the start of a playthrough, you select two characters and can tag out whenever you have taken a lot of damage or when you simply want to extend a combo. The character who has been switched out, like in Marvel vs Capcom, can also regenerate a portion of their HP further, adding to the strategy in this one. Every time you perform one of your extremely useful special moves, your special meter enters a cooldown phase to prevent naughty spamming. Fortunately, the meter recovers over time anyway, but the opportunity is there to speed it up by hitting or defeating enemies. If you like experimenting, different moves use different amounts of SP. Each character has specials that are useful for defense, and another for range, with a third that is unique to them, giving us plenty of options to try out. If your character gets knocked out, it is possible to revive them or purchase upgrades with your cash at the end of each sector. And, as mentioned earlier, remaining cash after a playthrough is converted into tokens, with the additional bonus of your score being placed on the global leaderboard. Want to know something amusing? As of recording this video, it appears that I currently have the highest Double Dragon score on the entire planet, which not only makes me the Double Dragon World Champion, but also the Wizard. Now let's touch on the game's story. Upon embarking on the story mode playthrough, we are shown an amazingly old school looking cutscene informing us that this is the year 1990X AD. The world is in a state of decay, a nuclear war has ravaged cities and the population struggles to survive. New York City is now ruled by 4 major gangs. As the gangs fight for total dominance, riots and crime consume the streets. One day at Bimmy and Jimmy's dojo, a man we have never seen before walks in exclaiming, "Is anyone here? This young lady needs help." Bimmy and Jimmy notice the woman is Marion and check on her to see if she's okay. The man explains he has not hurt her and he is the city's new mayor. Officer Marion was caught in a gang conflict during a patrol, but he managed to get her out. The mayor states he is looking for Bimmy and Jimmy's father and master of the dojo to bring the thugs down. But a new character known as Matin steps in, informing the mayor he went missing. Marion, Bimmy and Jimmy decide they want to rage through the streets in a final fight against the gangs, begging this mysterious Uncle Matin to join them. Do so he does and the adventure is on, but who even is Uncle Matin? Well, fortunately I got full clarity from Raymond. With his introduction, Raymond adds, it was mostly a question of who to include in the starting roster. Billy and Jimmy are the must-have balanced characters, and Marion was quite an easy choice because she's highly recognisable and her identity as a police officer would allow interesting gun gameplay. For the fourth character, he wanted someone new to spice things up. Grapples are really popular, so he was first designed as a wrestler, but he thought since Marion uses a gun, it will be interesting if this character uses a shield to complement that. On top of that, he also thought that a lot of gamers are probably older now, and since Double Dragon Gaiden is sort of an alternate timeline prequel, everyone is a lot younger. So he made him an older man, as he imagined a lot of players might play with their kids now, and they can play as Uncle Matin to protect them. As to the name of Matin, he always found it intriguing that there was a building with the word Matin on it in the original arcade game. If the brothers lived there, you'd imagine it says Susetsu Ken Dojo or something like that. So when he came up with the character, who's supposed to be a guardian to the young Lee brothers, he thought it'd probably make more sense for him to be the owner of that place. Upon choosing your two characters for a playthrough, differently from previous Double Dragon games, we are brought to a mission select screen, where like in Mega Man games, we get to choose the order of which boss and stage area we tackle first. Speaking of which, the idea of including multiple different gangs with unique identities in the game is a nod to the Warriors, which is interesting as the reskin of Kunio-kun for the Western market, known as Renegade, was also inspired by the Warriors, so a nice callback there. Some of these crime lords you will recognise from previous games, such as the iconic Machine Gun Willie, or how about Duke, the often forgotten final boss from Super Double Dragon, due to the fact that the team ran out of time and never got round to creating cutscenes to help fully establish him. When taking on these missions, what is particularly interesting is that the stages completely change based on which order you choose to tackle them in, with the later you leave a gang unpunished, the more they will expand their operations and take over more sectors. This means you only have to clear one sector when tackling the first gang, but 3 sectors for the later crime lords. There is a lot of variety of different routes to take through the game, with different sectors to rampage through depending on the choices you make. In a separate interview with Game Rant, Raymond commented on this implementation, adding it was included as it really has to do with replayability. I understand with past beat 'em up games, like in our memory, those games lasted for quite a while. In truth though, a lot of these games were less than 60 minutes. Then you replay them again and again and again. This time around I wanted to make sure that when you replay the game, there are different things you can explore and alternate routes. With each run, the player can actually change to a different character or combination of characters. They can explore different routes. Each time they play, they will see different things that enhance the experience and keep them gaming, which to be fair is certainly applicable to me, hence why I am currently top of the global leaderboard, baby, yeah. Throughout these playthroughs, you will notice Easter eggs and stage features aplenty that are callbacks to various other games in the series. Raymond notes that not only did he use all of the games for inspiration, but even the movie and the animated TV show too. This game really is a celebration of everything Double Dragon. Speaking of everything Double Dragon, this is too reflected in the game's music, with each piece from the game's soundtrack being amazing rearrangements of various iconic catchy tunes from this franchise's iconic past. This game is amazing. Something I have not yet touched on, which I feel I perhaps should, is the game's graphics. I recall when we first looked at the trailer for this game back in May, my comment section in particular were not big fans of the game's art style, with the most common complaint being that they did not feel this looked like a Double Dragon game. My personal response to that would be, what the bloody hell does a Double Dragon game even look like? As from my memory playing every game in the series, the graphical styles and art direction taken game to game is even more varied than the franchise's roller coaster quality. Even the arcade games and the NES games that share the same names look completely different from one another, and Double Dragon 5 looks nothing like Double Dragon Neon, and that game looks nothing like Double Dragon the movie game for the Neo Geo arcade. What sews most of the franchise together, in my opinion, is the series' recurring music, and this one, as mentioned, has the iconic tracks in abundance. As you have probably seen from my leaderboard score I showed you, I have enjoyed this game enough over the past few days that I have chosen to play through it over and over, checking out different routes and different bosses. The game is highly addictive, easily the most addictive Double Dragon game I have ever played, and in my opinion, in terms of fun factor, it's right up there with Streets of Rage 4 and Shredder's Revenge. This game is just that freaking good. Perhaps one of the craziest features amongst the many unlockables of a huge roster of additional playable characters, each with their own strengths, weaknesses and special moves. Unlock a Bobo, Linda, Burnoff and many more. Their experimentation options are absolutely tremendous. This whole game is insane. Questioning Raymond further about this fantastic game, he stated that he thinks a great beat 'em up is one that makes you come back for more and helps you de-stress after a hard day at work. Or they just function as a game you want to turn on and have a good time. In the past, they used to be great arcade experiences, where you and your friend could have a memorable time together. And he imagines the exact same people from back in the day are now older and play the games with their kids too. As for the genre's rise in popularity, he thinks the community has always been there for these sort of games, with videos on my channel for example proving there is a crowd who are highly passionate about these games. As for their disappearance and recent re-emergence, Raymond suggests that AAA studios never want to make them, and indie developers were not able to handle them up until recent years. This is because beat-em-ups require a lot of intense artwork and animation, and players expect them to not only be multiplayer, but they must be online as well, making it such a high barrier of entry for indie developers. Part of the reason why we're seeing more of them now is because the indie scene is getting more and more saturated. So developers are looking to make genres that others couldn't or haven't, so as to stand out from the crowd. At the same time, the tools have now made certain development work easier, and the teams are getting bigger, allowing developers to take on bigger games. This is why beat-em-ups are back, and only getting better and better. As for Double Dragon Gaiden, Raymond wishes to introduce some new design experiences to the genre, and to hopefully push it forward even if it's just a little bit. The franchise has had a rocky history, so he hopes that players can see the effort that he has put in to bring the Double Dragon franchise back into the limelight. As for what he is most proud of all with this one, is the game's looping nature, and how players are motivated to play the game repeatedly to unlock more characters, adjust for difficulty and play again. I've already played this game thoroughly and absolutely love it, but I thought it would be interesting to ask Raymond how he would sell the experience to others. He claims that if you're a fan of beat-em-ups in general, then he believes you will find enjoyment in the many innovations they've introduced to the genre, ranging from tagging mechanics, roguelite elements, and the many different unique characters you can play as. And if you're not familiar with the genre, he'd say beat-em-ups are traditionally the easiest action games you can get into and have fun. The game's dynamic difficulty allows you to tweak the difficulty how you like it. He assures players not to be frightened of the roguelite elements they have implemented, as the goal of the game is not to kill the player repeatedly, but for you to play and win repeatedly, each time trying to do better than your last try. And speaking of which, I guess it is that very reason why I have found myself bloody addicted to this game. Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons is simply stupendous, and perhaps the greatest Double Dragon game ever made, and most certainly the most enjoyable in the modern era. I highly recommend that you buy this game and play it now. Beat-em-ups don't get better than this, and surely you want to knock me off my world champion pedestal too. Anyway, huge thanks to Raymond taking the time to kindly answer all of my questions about this one, and if you want to learn more about Double Dragon's history, click on my 3-hour and 20-minute long full series retrospective now. Cheerio!